Welcome back to Becky Amio Horse Training, and this is LR Blue Ambrose, and this is going to be his 5th ride today. If you haven't seen the other ones, I will link them in the description box below. Don't forget to subscribe to my channel and like this video if it's something you like watching, and leave me a comment below. Today we're going to take a little field trip out to the pasture, his first ride out, but we're going to start in the round pen and work on a few new skills and techniques that he's been working on already. And we're going to go from there. So we're going to have a little more editing in this video because I have to give time for my cameraman to get out ahead of me. He's going to be riding on a 4-wheeler. I'm going to take the 2 dogs with me, so this colt is getting the full exposure today. He's going to have to work alongside dogs and 4-wheelers his whole life. There's horses in adjacent pastures that I'm riding through, and I want you to see it all. If he decides to nicker at somebody, if he decides to act up because he sees somebody, I'm going to try to keep all that in there, and you're going to see how I handle it when they go out for their very first time. Thanks for watching. Here we go, starting from the lick tub again, and he didn't want to stand real still for me this time. So I'm just going to go ahead and pet on him and rub on him, let him know that it's a good thing that I'm up here, and then kick the lick tub just back over to where I need to get on him and readdress it and step on. I'm not going to drill on him here. I'm not going to go back and forth, mounting and dismounting, because I'm going to try to get after it a little bit faster today, and I'm going to go ahead and bend him around both directions and make sure he's giving his head around. It's important that I release at specifically the right moment because he kind of wants to circle around a little bit when I'm doing this, and I have to find that very moment where he stops and he gets soft in that rein, and then release that rein to him when he's still bent around. That is really, really important in the timing. The very first maneuver I'm going to ask of him is a stop, and we're going to roll away into the rail. And you know, he didn't want to stop and rock back onto his hind legs for me, so I just correct him. It's not a jerking move, it's just a solid pressure on the reins. He argues with me a little bit, gaps his mouth a little bit. As long as I'm consistent, that will go away, and the faster I can get his feet moving, the less opportunity he has to gap his mouth and argue with me. So I take him right into a trot and move out. Now I've already warmed him up today. Before I got on, he'd already had his groundwork done. So otherwise I would have probably spent a little bit more time walking him before I kicked him right up into a trot like this. Ask him for a stop. I always pet when I get a stop. By petting and holding onto the reins like that and reaching up his neck like I do, it's a giving rein, it's a releasing rein. And so he understands that the pressure is taken off. Okay, and it's a trust factor, and so when I release that pressure on those reins, he knows, and it's very, very clear to him that he did it correctly. So I start trotting some figure 8s, take a lope as I come across, get my left lead, and I will tell them easy usually, and I quit riding a little bit when I break down to a trot like that. And if you notice, I'm starting to ask him for the stop from a trot, and that adds a certain degree of difficulty when you're asking for a stop. And then also I'm starting to ask him for that roll away without any sort of preparation work. So this is a test for him. I didn't prepare him by doing turns on the forehand first. I'm just starting to ask him to roll away in defense. So this is a new concept for him, and there's a little bit of argument there. There's a little bit of body out of position there. You'll see a little bit of mouth gapping as we do this, but I have to be very, very consistent in my hands and very consistent in all of my cues. Here again, petting him as soon as he gets the stop. Now I set him up. I was way too close to the rail there to ask him for that roll, but the roll away is actually getting a lot better coming back to the left. He's not cheating me nearly as bad as he was, and I'm not getting a turn on the forehand anymore. I'm getting more of like a quarter turn on the haunches, and I'm going to take it. I'm going to take whatever I can get at this point. He's taking and holding the left lead really good this direction. I'm really happy with that. But if you've noticed, I didn't point it out immediately when it happened, but there's been a couple of times going to the right that he either crossfired or he didn't take the lead correctly. But we also know that from looking at how he rides out in the arena, we know that the left side is his strong side and the right side is a little bit weaker for him. So we just need to practice it a little bit more often and make sure we practice it correctly. We need to make sure that he doesn't continue to go around on the wrong lead or crossfire for too long, because that'll create a pattern and that'll create muscle memory. And I really liked here how he stopped and backed up a few steps for me without any argument. He's getting a lot softer through his pole, his jaw. He's getting softer through his back and softer through his hind end. I believe that it takes softening in the hind end and some lateral softening in order to get a quality backup. It's not a mouth thing. It's backing up is not all about in the mouth or having a great big bit that makes them stop and back up. It comes from a supple, soft body that gives to pressure. Now he's playing game over really nice for me, and I believe he really understands now that this is his time to rest. He's on a long, loose rein. This is his time to relax, because when I pick up those reins again, we're going to get after it, and he understands that this is his time to collect himself. I set him up again here for a backup, and I'm going to roll away into the fence. So something else that he's starting to show me here as I correct him and move his hip back over to hold it in place while I roll him is he's getting behind the bit and he's getting over bridled, and that can happen early on, and we need to address it as soon as it happens, because it's really hard to fix. And sometimes it's because they are intimidated by the bit. They're either intimidated by the bit or the rider is way too aggressive and using way too much rein and pulling on them a lot. And I believe a lot of this has to do with being intimidated by this bit. And I will share that video in the description box here about the bit I use to start colts in, and what I use in these instances and some of my beliefs. But this colt is starting to get behind the bit like that, and he's tucking his head too much. And anytime a horse will tuck their head that much, I can't get them to do these basic maneuvers. So if he wants to argue with me a little bit here, I'm going to bend his head around and I'm going to kick his hip around. And I'm going to try to get his head up and elevated. Some of these maneuvers are easier to do and to teach the horses when their head is above the vertical, and instead this guy is tucking his head into his chest to get away from the bit pressure. And now some folks think that this is, oh, he's getting collected and we're getting a headset on him. And no, he's not getting a headset. He's not getting collected. He's just trying to avoid my bit pressure. So I need to recognize that when it happens. And it still took me several rides before I finally transitioned him out of this bit. So we're going to see a little bit more of this as we go on. So here I try to roll him into the fence again. And he is super, super crabby with me at this point. You're going to see a big old tail swish out as we come out of here. He is fried. He's over being worked on in the round pen. He's over being tuned up on. I try to move him out just to give him another job and free him up a little bit. And as soon as he gets in a happy place, I'm going to go ahead and let him walk, and we're going to head out and go out and ride across the road. Okay, we're going to play game over here for just a second, and then I'm going to walk him up to the gate, and we're going to work this gate. This is just another opportunity to practice this gate before I head out. And watch this. We've practiced it now 2 times. This is the 3rd time working this gate, and he darn near does it how he's supposed to. I think he's starting to really understand where I want his feet, where I want his body in relation to that gate panel. He needs to be parallel to it. And I take that opportunity to step off of him and give him the release, and then lots of petting and rubbing on him. This is the first time I will step up on him from the ground, and I'm really pleased with how he behaved for me to get up on him from the ground. If you've been following along, every other time I've been mounting him from some sort of mounting block or that lick tub. And we're gonna head out of here. And now this is where the editing gets interesting, and I'm sorry for all the clips that will be put together here, but I had to give a lot of time for my cameraman to get out ahead of me. I had to wait for him, and there's a little bit of a learning curve as we learn, you know, how far away he needs to be in order to keep me in focus. So there's a little bit of distance there and probably lose a little interest, but I wanted to really truly get everything for my viewer, for you guys, so you can see how this colt behaves on his first ride out. This pasture that I'm riding across the road to go riding in is one of the pastures that I almost always go out to first. It's the flattest, there's the least amount of rocks and holes, and in the event I have any sort of a problem, run away, spook, run off, go to bucking with me, the footing's a little bit better and there's less of a chance of having a wreck for me. And I'm usually able to down regulate them within reason when I'm out on the flat like this, rather than trying to do it in a pasture with hills and badger holes and prairie dog holes and whatnot. I think this pasture is just under 2 miles square, and so what I try to do is all I'm doing is heading out in a straight line. I'm following the fence, I'm pretending that we're checking fence, and try to take a trot, and if somebody's confident and comfortable enough, I will lope them on this first time out. And Charlie and Weatherby always go with me, and Charlie's always a pain, and he's always zooming in and out and up at the horse's face, and it's just something for the horses to get used to. Something else that I want you to notice here is, look, now that we're riding out, that head came up, didn't it? And that fixes a lot of problems riding these colts out. He doesn't have his head tucked in his chest anymore, does he? And he looks out at these mares across the road. Those are brood mares. He was actually raised out in that pasture out there, so I know he knows it really well. And I like how he keeps going. He never did nick her the whole time we were out there. And I was really surprised, but he kept his head about him and just kept on going in a straight line for me. Coming down the south side of this pasture, we go ahead and take a lope. Now, when I first lope them out in the pasture, I let them take whatever lead they're comfortable with. And we know at this point he's most comfortable on his left lead, and quite honestly, I'm a left lead person. I knew he was going to take a left lead. I'm more comfortable on the left lead, and I let him take it. And I let him pretty much go whatever speed he wants, within reason. I mean, I'm obviously not going to let him go running off, but he was comfortable enough to slow down the lope on his own and go back to a trot, and I'm fine with that. We have more horses off in the distance, off to the south. He doesn't even recognize that they're there. He just keeps on going forward, and I really like that about him. He kept his mind on his business. Once they've already chosen a lead to start off with, now I try to get him to take the right lead here, and you can tell how aggressively I'm posting with him. I was posting to pick up the right lead. Now, if you don't recognize that, I want you to go back a few rides to where I discuss taking the correct lead from posting on a diagonal. This is how we get in timing with our horses, by posting on the correct diagonal to take the lead that we want. He wasn't taking it here, so I'm going to set him up to take that right lead as much as I can. I'm going to go ahead and let him lope on the left lead for a little while. And I'm going to circle him around to the right to try to get this right lead at least one time. And this is one of the things that I fear that, or I feel that a lot of folks aren't doing that are riding these horses out. They're not forcing them to take a required lead when they're out. They'll just let them ride out and take the lead that they're comfortable on. And this is how we create imbalances in our horses. And this is why I'm trying to make our horses balanced that I ride, by having them work on the correct lead that I ask for at all times, whether it's in the arena or out in the pasture like this. And we finally get the right lead, and I let him lope on it for a little while until he's ready to stop on his own. And I just quit riding, and he'll break down to a trot all on his own. So here's Charlie, forever the overachiever, showing me the way home. This final last stretch to home, I always quit riding. I start to let the reins go long and loose because I want him to think about walking. He didn't want to at first, so I had to pick up on him a little bit, and then he took the walk. And then I went long with the reins. I want him to go long and low with his head, and in a nice relaxed walk the rest of the way home. And at this point, he knows how to play game over and walk. He's learned that through his previous rides. And we're going to take this last stretch of road home. Okay, let's say hypothetically he wanted to trot and jig and nicker this whole last stretch back into the yard. Let's say he wanted to do that. Well, in this case, I would go ahead and let him do it. And you know what? I would probably send him as fast as I could back into the yard, and we would go right into the arena and lope until he couldn't lope anymore, and then he would be tied up the rest of the day. And that's how I handle horses that want to be barn sour, horses that want to nicker the entire time we ride out. Otherwise, this guy wants to walk home really quietly and calmly and confidently. So I'm just going to let him do just that. Riding out takes a certain amount of planning. The first time I take colts out, I usually do it earlier in the day, like shortly after they've gotten done eating breakfast. What I like to do is give myself the rest of that day in the event I do need to go take them back into the arena and work them pretty hard because they were naughty when we rode out. And what I do is they get tied up at the tie rail the rest of the day. That is what they get to do after they've been ridden out. And so they understand that, hey, coming back to the yard after a ride out doesn't mean I get to go back to my pen and eat my grain and eat my hay. it means I'm going to go stand at the tie rail like any good ranch horse ought to be able to. As I come back across the road with the dogs like this, I really have to start paying attention to vehicles coming down our road. It's a heavily traveled road for what it is. We get a lot of agriculture traffic and big trucks, and usually hauling some sort of grain. And when I've got the dogs like this, I'm always nervous about them. So you're going to see me kind of look back and forth a lot and wait as I go across the road here. And I've had some horses kind of panic a little bit and stop in the middle of the road on me. So I'm always really careful about when I head out across it as I'm riding somebody brand new for the first time. Another thing that I want to point out that I haven't talked about in a few rides is that I'm always carrying my cell phone, and I always have my Bluetooth on. And the cell phone is carried on me, on my body, because it does no good if it's attached to the horse and the horse and I become separated. It's not going to work. So some way or another, you have to keep that cell phone on you. Too many times I've had to call JD to tell him to come get me. Either somebody left me in the pasture or something on me was broken and he needed to come gather me up and take me to the emergency room. So I can't stress that enough. Not only that, but I have a feature on my phone where my family pretty much knows where I'm at all the time. I kid you not, my parents know more about where I'm at now than they ever did when I was 15 or 16 years old. And so my dad knows when I ride out into the pasture. And so he also knows that if I don't return from the pasture as well. So it's always a good safety feature to have your phone on you, keep it on you in some way. I tuck it down into my half chap. If you can keep it in your back pocket, great, but it usually doesn't work too well in my back pocket when I ride. The very last thing I do when I walk back into the yard from a ride out, from the very first ride, is I walk Colts over this bridge. And it's a non-option. This Colt may never go in a trail class in his life, but he's going to go over this bridge. And the reason is because it will build confidence. It will help him load in the trailer better. It will help him walk over things in the pasture better. And it is going to improve our relationship tenfold if I can get him up on there and trust me that what I'm putting him up on is stable enough for him. And just like the gate, how I dismounted him when he did the gate correctly and was standing in the correct spot, I'm going to dismount him here right when he gets up on the bridge, because that's going to be the good spot. That's where I want him to understand that I'm going to give him a relief, I'm going to give him the release, and that's his reward for getting up on there. So that was a pretty uneventful first ride out, as it should be. I'm going to go ahead and pull his tack, and then he's going to stand tied right there for a few hours so he doesn't associate with coming back into the yard and going right back to his pen and back to eating. Don't forget to like this video, subscribe to my channel, and take a look at his other videos if you haven't watched them yet. We'll be back tomorrow with another video and his 6th ride. Thanks for watching.